Hey watch friends, I've been wanting to add a wandering hour complication to the collection for quite some time, but I've been waiting for the right one to come along. Today, we might have found a winner. We're going to be taking a look at two prototypes of the Olto-8 ROTO. This one is coming to Kickstarter on July 25th of 2023. One of the things that makes this so incredible is the price point. As of time of recording, they haven't announced the official price. However, it's going to be $300 and some odd for a wandering hour. But it doesn't stop there, and we'll unpack all the things I like about this as we go through. First, though, I do want to mention the elephant in the room. This does have some critiques that are going to be coming up, and one of the most glaring is, unfortunately, the glare. As you're going to see throughout the video here, unfortunately, the reflectivity is almost ever present for this, so we will address that as we go through. You know, it's definitely not a deal breaker, in my opinion, as we'll get to, just for kind of a spoiler, but we'll unpack that as we go through. And of course, don't worry, there's going to be varied footage as we go throughout the video. So we're going to take a look at a pair here today. There is a third one, and we'll talk about that further as well. But we've got the blue and the green, and I'll take these one at a time. But before we do, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the packaging, see how it's going to ship. The watch arrived in just a plain outer cardboard box. As we open that up, the first thing we see is this envelope here. You pop that open, and then you have this Olto-8 booklet. As you open it up, you can see that it is multilingual. Open up and you can see the English side here. And then it just gives you the basic information for that. As for the box itself, inside you have this other cardboard box. As you can see, fairly basic construction, kind of like a matte texture, has their branding. But then as you pop that open, this is where it gets good. So this is a flap style there, and then inside you have the real packaging. So you have this watch roll, and let's go ahead and set that aside. This had the tag that was actually on the watch itself, but this has a drawer down at the bottom, and then you have your warranty card down here as well. I do wish that they had done the booklet to where it would fit in that bottom drawer so you didn't have separate packaging, so maybe they'll change that on the production version. As far as the roll, you can see here this has a nice texture to it. It's a very compact size, so that's excellent as well. Has a snap enclosure there. And then as you open that up, you've got a pillow that just kind of sits down inside. So this is a great travel option. I really like the fact that you can easily just throw this in a bag, and it keeps the watch secure because it is a hard construction as well. So nicely done there. All right, now that we have a better feel for the packaging, let's go ahead and just take these one at a time, and we'll switch up as we go through the video. Let's knock out the basic specs like we always do, and then we'll unpack it in full detail, check varied footage, all that kind of good stuff. This is going to come standard with a 2-year warranty, so not bad there. It's the case size on this as specs is coming in on my calipers from the 3 to 9 at 38.6 millimeters. But then the bezel does step down. So actually, as you can see here, and we'll talk about this, but that lip here on the bezel, I'm getting 37.6. So that's a full millimeter step down, but you can see there's kind of a belly to the side of the case as well. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a nice compact 45.8 millimeters. The thickness. This actually is coming in on calipers at 12.5 millimeters for total thickness, but that's including that very highly domed crystal there. As you can see, the actual case itself is very slim. They state the spec at 9 millimeters, and I'm going to take them for their word because of the curvatures here with the crystal. It's hard to actually get an accurate measurement, but that seems to be about right. As far as the crystal itself, as we already talked about, it is a very highly domed sapphire crystal. As with all highly domed sapphire crystals, or crystals in general rather, you're going to find that it does pick up glare. So this one, despite the fact that this does have inner AR applied, unfortunately, the glare is still present. There is a lot that we'll talk about there that I think they could have potentially done to change that around, but that really is just kind of a characteristic of double dome. It doesn't entirely take away from the legibility or the overall enjoyment of the watch, but we'll talk about that because that, as I already mentioned, is a critique. As far as the movement, this comes with a nice reliable Miyota 9039. Many of you are probably familiar with the 9039 or at least the 9015. It's their 9 series from Miyota. It's automatic, does have hacking, hand winding, around 42-hour power reserve, higher beat, 28,800 beats per hour, all that kind of good stuff. This one is no exception here, though it does of course have the added complication with going with the wandering hour function. So it's nice to have a reliable base movement as the platform for that. So that's great to see, especially at this price point. The water resistance isn't too bad. You know, for the style of watch, this is coming with 50 meters or 5 atmospheres of water resistance. Let's go and switch over to the green for a little bit. But as far as the water resistance, for a dressier style watch, I really don't think that's too bad overall, and we'll talk about more of the characteristics there. These do come standard on these leather straps, as you saw pictured here, and these are the versions that they come with for the respective colorways. On the strap for weight, this is coming in at 60.6 grams, so really quite light, and it definitely does disappear on the wrist, but I changed it up for some other straps that we'll look at as we go through. Alright, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and dive deeper. First for the colors. As we already have seen here today, they have the blue and the green version that are going to be launching. Both of those are really great colorations. I like that a lot, and we'll see those more as we go through the video. There's additionally, though, a black version that they have included as well, and that's a really cool subdued style while still having the punch of a Wandering Hour. One of the things that you're going to immediately notice with this is that dial. They have a gradient enamel actually applied. So with that, you do get that kind of fume effect where it changes out to darker as you go towards the perimeter, really adds a nice color pop. And when the light hits it just right, you can see that it has somewhat of like a sunburst pattern to that, despite the fact that it is a very glossy finish. And that glossy finish is one of the things that we'll talk about as we go through, particularly in the critique section. That's one of the things that I think if they had gone with a more matte finish, I think that would have taken down some of this reflectivity. So of course you'd still have it from the high dome. And I like the fact that that pops off and actually allows more reflectivity to come through those discs that we'll talk about momentarily, but the trade-off is you do get more glare for it. So maybe they could have added outer AR or something like that, but we'll talk about that. As far as the printing, you can see that this does have a perimeter printed where you have kind of like a chapter ring there, so you have your hashes that go through. One of the things that's interesting, since this only goes from roughly the 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock position for actually reading the time, they did carry the hashes all the way through though, so that way you still get that characteristic of having the in general cohesive feel and vibe to this, despite the fact that you're not actually using the hashes through the rest of the watch. So that's kind of an interesting touch, and I think it was well done or well chosen overall, with one exception, and we'll talk about that later on. As far as the perimeter of this, so the actual chapter ring, so where you have your minutes indicated there, and these are in 5-minute increments, as you can see, bold with numerals at the 12 o'clock position, or roughly the 10 to the 2 o'clock position. That crystal, or that chapter ring though, one of the things that's so cool about that is it is actually a domed chapter ring, so it's very bold, very prominent. But one of the other things that's a cool characteristic is I didn't initially pick up on it, but as the light hits, it is translucent. So you actually get an interesting vibrancy and texture going on to that as well. So there's so many textures and so many different little accents that I like as you go through this, and I think it's a really cool touch. Additionally, beyond the numerals, down at the 12 o'clock, or the 6 o'clock side rather, you do have the text of automatic, Olto-8 ROTO, and then you additionally do have the 50 meters that's noted there as well. I don't find that that's too distracting, and especially since you do have all of that at the top, I think it might have been unbalanced if they didn't have text down at the bottom, so it actually kind of balances things out, so really not too bad there. As far as the hardware, this, with being a Wandering Hour, of course doesn't have traditional 3-hand configuration. What it does have in place of that though is that 3-pronged kind of spoke there in the middle. So that holds the 3 different discs that we'll look at here momentarily. The finishing on that is a very nice circular brushing, and I really like the application of the not only the finish that's applied there, but additionally the overall texture that they put. So of course, double finish, I guess. The finish of the brushing, but then additionally the finish of the coloration. I think it's very cleanly done and well chosen for the 2 different versions. You'll see that these 2 do have slightly different, or at least picks up differently as you go through with the different colors. So that's a pretty cool touch. The actual style of it reminds me of, if you've ever seen those 3-legged or 3-winged boomerangs, it reminds me of that, which I think is a good overall aesthetic and fits it well. As far as the discs themselves for the Wandering Hour, so those of course are going to be your hour indicators. They point at, as you can see, the minute ring up at the top, and we'll check that out here momentarily. But those are actually a polycarbonate. So as a result, those are extremely translucent for that, meaning that they pick up with that light and actually get kind of a gem effect to them. So on this blue, it almost looks like a sapphire that's actually applied, like the sapphire gem, not sapphire crystal. But additionally, you have for the green, that picks up kind of like an emerald. So it almost gets like a mineral effect to that, which is a really cool look, and I like that a lot. Additionally, just the little touches. When you look at the screws here, one of the things you'll notice, instead of using traditional screws, which I think would have looked a little tacky for that, they actually did these kind of like cross-shaped screws. So not only did I not find any marring or anything on there, but the overall aesthetic of that is really nicely done. And especially, again, at the $300 price point, it's kind of hard to believe there. So the overall finishing of this, so far, definitely pleased. But let's go ahead and switch over and check out the Lume. The Lume, as you can see here, this is going to be a Swiss Luminova. However, it is printed. So I will say, with printing, I always find that it's not going to have as much punch nor endurance. However, I found this, for being the style that it is for a dressier style watch, they didn't even necessarily have to include Lume. And the fact that they did, I think it performs pretty decently for what it is. So manage your expectations, not going to be a Lume monster, but at the same time, really not too bad either. So I'm relatively pleased with that overall, so I can't complain too much there. Shifting over to the bezel. The bezel, as we already looked at, of course, this is a fixed bezel construction. But with the fixed bezel, it doesn't stop there. So you can see it is so seamlessly integrated that it's hard to tell that it's not even just a one-piece construction for that. So it is so tight for the overall fitment of that. Really nicely done. But additionally though, as far as the machining, as you can see here, it is going to be fully polished, and that is a hand polishing, and that carries through the case, as we'll see momentarily. But one of the things that's so cool, check out the actual shape of that. Instead of going with a slope, they went with like a ball cut milling. So that's a concave pattern to that bezel, which is such a classy touch, and that's not the easiest thing to mill in the world. And it's very sharp, very crisp, very clean all the way through. So very impressive machining on that as well. Shifting over to the case, as we already alluded to, the case itself is going to carry through with that polishing. So that's consistent with the bezel, and it's going to be polished throughout. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it as far as that, but I think it fits, as we'll talk about. But additionally though, they did carry through. Check out those ball cuts on the side here. Let's get that at an angle, because again, this is a reflectivity monster everywhere, and of course fingerprint magnet. But those ball cuts, it's kind of like a curved teardrop shape to that. So that's a very complex or compound kind of cut in there. Again, very crisp for this as well. Really nice accent and touch, and that just really breaks up this overall silhouette. So the silhouette itself, it's so slim as it goes through with the overall aesthetic and flow, which I think is excellent, but then adding touches like that, really great touch. As we talked about there, or as you could see there, it does have downturn to the lugs. They come right down to the case back. So I think that's nicely incorporated there as well. Shifting over to the crown side, this, as you would expect for a dressier style watch, does not have a crown guard. And then as for the crown itself, this is coming in at 5.7 millimeters. It is a push-pull construction. And let's go ahead and actually check that out. For manipulation, very easy to click. And then let's look at that. Let's watch it change here. Let's look at that 5, change to 8 down there, and then shift around as we go through. So very easy to go there, push pull, standard configuration. Of course, it does have the hand winding as we talked about with the Miyota. Additionally, is going to be a coin edge for the milling, and then it is signed on the outside. As you can see, it is kind of like an etched signature there with their signature 8, which is kind of like the infinity symbol as well. So I think that that works well, and I think it's definitely incorporated nicely into the watch. I think it fits the overall aesthetic for this somewhat dressy style piece. Shifting over to the case back. The case back on this is a screw-in construction, which for a dress style watch I think is a nice touch. They could have just gone with a press fit, but I prefer seeing the screw-in style. As far as the overall aesthetic of this, as you can see, it does have an exhibition window. The movement itself is rather plain. It just has a standard, the standard rotor for it. However, at the price point, you really can't expect too terribly much, but it does still have the standard 9 series Geneva striping and those kind of things. The finish is going to be principally brushed on the exterior. That's good to see that change over, since the rest of the watch is polished. On the case back, you always just get the oil from your wrist and everything else on there, so it's just constantly covered in fingerprints. Not that you see it, but still. As far as the text, it's a nice, simple, clean text all the way around. You do have a lot of text on the back: Olto-8 ROTO, Sapphire, all stainless steel, automatic, 50 meters water resistance, all that kind of good stuff. So they give you plenty of information, but I think it's cleanly incorporated. And I like the fact that this uses keyholes, so kind of an inlaid style for the screw-in. So that's well done. Shifting over to the straps. As we already saw, the straps on this are going to be, of course, the leather included straps. Both of these are going to be 20 millimeters at the lugs and then taper down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. These leather straps have a kind of alligator finishing to them. I don't believe they're actually alligator straps. However, they do have that style or that texture to them. Additionally, they do have signed buckles as well, and as you'd expect here, the buckles are highly polished as well. So it has that Alto and then kind of like that Infinity 8 symbol for that as well. And then on the back, they do have quick release spring bars as well. So that's definitely a welcome touch and allows me to change these over as I personally did. On these particular ones, I was running on the blue one, I was running a Colarib Strapple, which I've reviewed in the past, and that's kind of like a leather, synthetic leather that's apple-based for that, and I think it fits the overall aesthetic of this well. I was pleased with that, keeps the leather kind of look for it, but is more fitting for my personal needs and preferences there. For the green one, I actually ran that just to see what it was like on a khaki canvas strap. And I've got to say, despite the dressier style, while it did make it more casual, I think it actually fits the overall aesthetic well. And it worked nicely, and it was, of course, supremely comfortable there. So that was a good touch. Alright, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in some comps for different reasons. First, all of these are going to be relatively similar size. So this one here, blue next to blue, this is the Zelos Nova, and this is the Aventurine variant here. So you can see just how that presents. You can see certainly this is more of a bright, vibrant blue, whereas this Aventurine is going to pick up with kind of that glitter and sparkle, but it's a very deep blue, almost kind of purple in some lighting and those kind of things. But that gives you an idea as far as sizing and aesthetic. This definitely gives that dressy vibe, but you can see it still has kind of some sports elements to it as well. Next up, one we looked at relatively recently here, and that I have a couple on the way. This is the Dorenzo Aerolite. This is the DRZ02R. Very unconventional as far as the case styling. This one is 39 millimeters. However, with being the cushion case, you can see it does present much larger for that. But if you look at the actual dial areas, those are relatively similar and comparable there. And then here is going for a different style, but another fixed bezel. This is the MMI Sky Hunter. This one is 38 millimeters for that. So again, this is going to be relatively comparable, but you can see it does definitely have more presence to it overall. As you saw with this one, this definitely is, I'm sure for some larger wristed folks, the specs and overall sizing is going to be on the smaller side. However, I think it's actually very wrist versatile, especially for the dressy style. I think they chose the fitting for this well, which with that, let's go ahead and actually wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, and we've already talked about some, as well as the overall summary. First, for the positives. The value on this, in my opinion, is absolutely unreal, and we'll talk about that further, but $300 and some odd simply for a Miyota 9 series based wandering hour watch is fantastic. I mean, I really can't think of anything else that's been at that price point, especially for the quality that you're getting here. And speaking of the quality, the finishing is shockingly good. The hand polishing is actually, it's very crisp, it's very clean. I can't see much waviness or lines or anything like that. The milling is exceptional. As we looked at with the bezel, the case side, everything there, just extremely impressive, especially on a $300 and some odd watch. That's just nuts to me. So I think that's really fantastic there. The legibility. Despite the reflectivity that we've talked about and the fact that this is unconventional, the legibility is actually great as far as for at-a-glance legibility. As you can see here, this is 8 roughly 25, and this is 6 roughly 15. And that's, of course, looking through camera, making it even harder. But, really, it's just quick and easy to tell whatever number's up there, it's going through, whatever second or whatever minute it's at, that's where it's at. No running second, of course, so you're not going to have precision legibility, but we'll talk about the minute legibility because you don't have precision there either, or at least easily so. The colors, I think, are perfect. They went with a casino theme for this, is what they were shooting for. And this, to me, I think it is very reminiscent of if you think about like poker chips or casino chips, or you think about like roulette wheel, all that kind of stuff. I think it has little vibes of all of that as you go through. So I think it's very cohesive with that. And I like the color choices for particularly the blue and green, I think are in very keeping with that. Very much put me in mind of that style. Sizing, as we've already talked about, on my 6.5 inch wrist, I think they're fantastically sized. Overall, the thinness, I think really helps it to hug the wrist well, but then additionally the overall kind of case proportions, I think it's versatile. I think larger wrists than mine are going to be just fine, but then I think it could go smaller than my wrist as well. So man, woman, unisex, etc. This is just fine overall, so I think it's a good versatile style sizing there, sorry. And as far as the movement, I already talked about, I am a big fan of the Miyota 9 series movement, so I think it's great that they incorporated that. Nice to have a reliable movement, despite the fact that this is, a complication adjustment on that. I expect it's going to still have great reliability, plus the 2-year warranty. All right, so what about the critiques, though? First, as far as the reflectivity, that one I think we've talked about enough as we've gone through. That is ever present for this. You've seen it through the video. You've seen it in all the other footage. You see it in real-world usage. That is, to me, that is the Achilles heel of this. Ultimately, if they could get rid of that reflectivity, I would say unequivocally, I don't really have any other gripes with this watch. Absolutely, it is a complete and total home run. That's the biggest thing that I think holds it back. And there are some things that I think they could have done. If they had gone, instead of having the gloss enamel for the base of the dial, I think if they had done a matte or something like that, or alternatively, while I hate to say it because I don't like the decrease in scratch resistance, if they had gone with a outer AR, that might have helped as well, but I would have loved to have seen that tamed more. As I already mentioned at the outset, it doesn't stop me from enjoying the watch. However, it is something that I absolutely have to call out for that, because that is the biggest downside of this. Minute legibility. As you look through here, when you see the hashes, it does have wide hashes here, like 5-minute increments all the way around, but then it carries through with the 5-minute hashes there, or 5-minute bold hashes, but then you can see it does have sub hashes in between. I can tell you in person, it might not pick up on camera as well, but between the fact that these discs do not have any kind of dot or hash or anything there, so you're just going from the number, and of course some of them are 2-digit numbers, some of them are different shapes, all that kind of stuff. It's actually a little harder to be precise than you would think for that when you look across the changing time. But additionally, those hashes are so stinking close together, and my eyes are not that old, but I will say it's tough for me to make out to see what it is. I don't wear readers or anything along those lines. However, and nothing wrong with it if you do. I think we all get there. But that being said, for even my eyes, it's hard to tell. If you have worse eyes than me, you're absolutely going to struggle with that. So it's just going to be at a glance legibility, which that part's great, but don't expect precision legibility. The polishing, this is one of those things that I know polishing is very polarizing. For me personally, I ordinarily would not say I would be accepting or typically accepting of a watch that's full polish like this. I think it does actually work with the design. Everything is so petite, slim, plus they break everything up for lines, so it's not just like slabs of polish anywhere. So I think it works well, but that's something that I do expect is going to be polarizing. I wouldn't have necessarily minded if they did some brush accents beyond the case back, but that being said, I think it actually works well, so I don't know if I'd change that or not, but I did want to bring it up. And then of course the rotor, as we talked about, it is just a basic stock rotor there, but again, on a $300 watch, what do you really expect? If they had done some branding or something, that would have elevated it a little more, but such a minor thing. So where does that leave us at the end of the day? Ultimately, kind of going to where we started. So first, I do want to mention I am getting to keep this green one, if you saw that banner there. So this one will actually be staying in my collection, but additionally, I might actually pick up the blue myself as well, because this is one of those ones at the price point, it's almost a no-brainer. To me, if you have been in the market for a wandering hour, I really don't think you're going to find a better deal than this. It's absolutely fantastic. Yes, it's a Kickstarter campaign. I know many people are very off of Kickstarter right now, but it's such a low risk as 300 and change. I can tell you from seeing these samples, the company has been great in working with them for coordination, very responsive, all that kind of stuff. But additionally, looking at the finishing, if they can deliver this on the production version, you are absolutely going to love what you're getting, despite some of the critiques and faults that we talked about. So there you have it. I hope this video has been enjoyable for you. I really know that I really have enjoyed kind of getting to know these watches and preparing this. But if you did like it as well, please do hit that like button. Additionally, if you haven't already done so, give that subscribe button a tap. Also, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Which one of these do you like? Is this your style? Is the glare a deal breaker for you? Which color's your favorite? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.